Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from the rooftops. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the podcast. We've got a good episode ahead of us today. We've got some F1 recap of the Spanish Grand Prix, a little bit of League of Legends talk, some Magic the Gathering, all the usual. But Justin, it's good to see you after seeing you in person over the weekend. It was nice getting together.
Yeah, I agree. That was a really fun time watching the Spanish Grand Prix in person together, and it's interesting. Like, you just feel like somebody just exists on the computer, and then you see them in real life, and it's like, whoa, you are not just
you're not 2D.
Yeah. So it was fun to reach out and touch you, my friend.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was saying it to Colleen afterwards. It's funny because we haven't, seen each other in person in a bit, but because we keep up and do this every week, I was like, it just felt like we had seen each other, a week ago. Like, it's so easy to pick up and everything, and it was cool to get to watch in person with you and Sarah and everything. It was a fun time, lots of good food, and good hanging out. So
big time agree.
Yeah, so that actually was my rose this week, so I can lead us into the rose, thorn, and seed. It was
talk about it.
Getting to hang out. We had some breakfast, made some casserole, made some bacon, had some fruit and all. Colleen and I really enjoyed you and Sarah going and walking with us at cemetery too. That's it's funny hearing from your perspective. It was not what you guys expected when I said we go on dog walks through the cemetery.
Yeah, and she had doubled down on that comment again, and there are a bunch of smaller ones around us, but I'd never been to one that's like that has walking paths built through, and large enough that you could film movies there and use that cemetery as a cinematic piece in your films. So yeah, I thought that was fun, and we commented later about the music playing when we walked up. That
was unexpected.
Yeah, and it was like, wait, are we in the right place? That's what it very much felt like.
It was a bit jarring. Great cause that they were sponsoring and everything, but I was expecting a quiet, peaceful walk in the cemetery like we normally see on a Sunday, and they had a little bit more going on, but nonetheless, very fun time seeing you guys, and we got to watch a pretty fun race, but it was a good time hanging out. So for my thorn this week, I had briefly said it to you kind of a minute ago when I was asking about your allergies, but my thorn is that I am concerned about a couple things with my running. My knees they're not hurting, but I can feel them a little bit more, just I guess in general, it's not pain, but I can physically feel that there might be some inflammation or something. And I don't know if that's from my bike ride that I went on with the repetitive motion of flexing the knees more. I have no idea what might have triggered that to be a little more tender, but I am a little worried about that. But also with the race that I'm running being next weekend, I'm a little concerned about the wildfire smoke from Canada that has made the air quality not healthy here in Philadelphia. So I'm not able to just walking around my property throughout the day today, I felt like I was sitting next to a campfire for a couple hours. You get that kind of little dryness in the back of your throat and everything. And so that has definitely put a little damper on my plans because I hate running on treadmills. So even though that's an option, I don't know if I'm going to take it because I also don't think that that will be good for my knees. So kind of goes hand in hand a little bit. I feel like the treadmills just are a little less forgiving than just running on normal pavement that's not moving.
Yeah, I think it's a little higher impact, and especially if you're on to like if you get onto like grass or like dirt sections, it becomes even less impactful
Right.
on your knees. You know, that's like where it's like really cushiony to run on. So yeah, you're right. You may experience some more like knee discomfort with the treadmill. So you're seeing like you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't in one scenario here.
Yeah, a little bit, because in different ways, if I do the treadmill, then I might cause my knees to start acting up a little bit more. But if I don't run at all, then I'm gonna struggle a good bit probably next week for the race. Not that I have any. I have like a target goal for myself, but I'm not like competing for anything in particular. I just wanted to have a motivation to go out and like start running and working out again. So in that sense, this has definitely worked, but I also want to hit my goal like time. So we'll see how that goes next week. But hopefully I can maybe take a little bit of a rest and get back at it in a couple days. But with that, I am going to be up in New York for a wedding this weekend. So that is my seed for this week. I'm looking forward to it, but I may have to see if I can find a little bit of time to go out and stretch the legs a little bit. But otherwise, looking forward to a very fun weekend ahead. So that's my rose, thorn, and seed for this week.
Yeah, I'm curious with the knee if I wonder if like a knee brace is indicated here as a little bit of support. I know you like maybe feel like it's not at that point. I'm curious like if you've ever used them before, if like they help or not help.
I haven't gone with knee braces. I wear ankle braces for basketball just to like
Gotcha.
I've rolled my ankles enough that I'm just like I want the extra support there and all.
Right.
With my knees though, it hasn't ever felt like it is a support issue necessarily, and maybe I'm just wrong about that because I don't know how the mechanics exactly work, but it doesn't feel like I'm getting pain from any sort of like side to side type movement where I feel like a brace like holds you a little bit more steady with your form.
Like lateral movement.
Yeah, like lateral movement
Gotcha.
doesn't seem to be like something
That
that's affecting it. So I don't know if I
Okay.
need the extra support as much as I need maybe a way to fight the inflammation a little bit better. Which because I'm allergic to anti-inflammatories, so I can't take like ibuprofen or Advil or Aleve or anything like that to like medicinally help with the inflammation.
Right.
I've tried CBD before, but it didn't seem to do a ton. But at the time,
Gotcha.
that was because I had broken my collarbone, and so it was a little bit of a different scenario.
Right.
So I've just always kind of stuck to like turmeric pills and stuff like that to try and naturally deal with it.
Gotcha. So you are like managing it with a supplement as well
Trying
for
to.
like
Yeah.
anti-inflammation. Gotcha. So you're okay. Okay.
I could probably ice a
Um
little bit more. That's probably not something that would hurt, but yeah.
well, I hope the combination of therapies that you do help it or at least keep it to a workable level at least till you're done the race and then you can give it some rest like you were talking about.
Yeah.
Um But yeah, I'll stop with the diagnosing here. I'll take you through my rose, thorn, and seed. My rose here as well is the walk through the cemetery. That was super pleasant, super peaceful. And there's a sense in which getting the dog out for a walk is a little bit of something that we were missing out on as well. So yeah, that was just a really nice time. And so that's my rose for the week. My thorn, I am just continually wanting things to be done yesterday. I need immediacy. Just because I'm putting effort in, I think that the whole thing can be solved. So just trying to be aware of impatience and do my best to, rein it in and understand that things get taken care of in a process and in their own time. And sometimes you can't really rush that.
Yeah, it's tough to not feel that way though. Like especially even with problems and issues, a lot of stuff in most cases can be resolved pretty quickly between the internet and like customer support and things like that are available to us. It's definitely different from I think back probably our like parents' generation. You couldn't just call up a company that made some product in your home necessarily and immediately talk to someone to troubleshoot something or figure something out. But we get so used to being able to do that or Google something and figure things out that having to go through a slower process is it makes it more frustrating than if it was like a typical thing we deal with.
Big time. And
yeah. I was like I was telling you over the weekend, I was dealing with that with our internet provider at my my community. It took me 5 to 6 hours of my Monday to get this person's internet up and running and all. And it was like, yeah, I was just miserable by the end of it because the waiting for people to do things or talking to the right person or whatever is not the most swift process in most cases.
Yeah, it really breaks an individual down. So that's my thorn here for the week, and then my seed is part of that thorn. I was given a little tidbit of hope from a friend, and a good in the meantime fix is going to be an internet hardline, just an Ethernet cable straight into the router. So I went out, got a 50-footer today, ran it from the office up into the ceiling, and then drop it down like right above the router. So it's like neat, out of the way. Don't have to like run it through, just like, trip on it, break our necks. So it seems like this is going to be a pretty good solution, at least until I figure out a final fix. But gotcha. Yeah, nice little. It feels like more than a Band-Aid type solution, because even if I never get the wireless thing figured out, like this can be a long-term solution. Yeah.
Not the like prettiest necessarily or whatever the case, right. But yeah, I gotcha.
So overall, definitely works. Definitely happy about it. So yeah, that's my rose, thorn, seed here for the week. Pretty simple.
Nice. We'll love to hear it, and hopefully the Wi-Fi or wireless situation isn't too tough to get resolved, because it's just nice to have things the way you want them.
But we're here, aren't we? We're talking over the interwebs.
I
would say I've patched things pretty well.
I would say so, but we can hop into the quick hitters for this week. So first off, we had the IndyCar Chevrolet Detroit Grand Prix on Sunday afternoon after the Spanish Grand Prix. So watching that, I don't know if you caught any of it, but that track is, and I've seen it before, but some of these IndyCar tracks, man, are brutal. They are so tight, and like the curbs are so high in some parts, and all like it is crazy to see how difficult it can be on these circuits. We had a number of guys running into the barriers who are veterans. Graham Rahal and they're cement barriers, so they're not forgiving at all. Graham Rahal did it. Roman Grosjean, unfortunately, had a failure, I think, on his right side. He had tweeted out because some people were going after him a little on Twitter, and he was like, our right rear tire failed before I crashed. That's what caused it, kind of thing. So unfortunate, and like really a big bummer for him, because looking at it, we had said the other week he was up in 5th in the standings. He's down to 11th. He has only finished, I think, 3 of the 7 races so far this season, and with I'd say 3 of those 4 being car failures or other issues as opposed to his own. The Indy 500 crash was on him, but this one, it sounds like there was a mechanical failure. I believe there was another one with a mechanical failure of some sort. Then he had one of the first races of the season where he got ran off by, I believe it was Scott Dixon, into the barriers and crashed out. So he's had a string of bad luck, but I mean, he's finished second, and I think like 7th or 11th in the races that he's finished. So second, and then 11th. So when he's able to finish, he's doing pretty decently.
2 out of 3, yeah. What does a racing outfit do with a driver like that? You know, when they're at the mercy of these failures.
I mean, I don't know if there's that much they can do other than just go into the next week and try and keep working and making sure things are all set up and functioning properly with the car. I think it's just a bit of bad luck. We've seen it in F1 with drivers. We saw a bunch with Ferrari last year when they were just having their engines explode on them throughout the season and whatnot. True. So, like, it's not unrealistic that these things do happen occasionally, but it's definitely unfortunate. And also for a guy who, like Grosjean, does occasionally crash on his own, having these ones that aren't due to anything he's doing, like, I think make that a little more difficult to deal with. So
right, that's a good point. Like, if he wasn't so I don't want to say prone to accidents, but I mean, yeah,
he's had a number. He's gone over that. Mistakes. Yeah, he's gone over the line enough times, and sometimes he saves it and is fine, and other times he doesn't, and that's just the kind of driver he is. I wouldn't, like you were kind of holding off, I don't think he's like accident prone as much as people give him flack for it.
Sure.
But I think in this case he's just had a little string of bad luck as well. So,
and then the question you have to ask is, do the pros outweigh the cons in that scenario? I'm just curious how long, you know.
I mean, to be honest, like, he's still in the driver's stand. He's in 11th in the driver's standings. He is by no means like out of this. Right. There's been 7 races. I think it's like 14 races, maybe.
Gotcha.
Let's see. 9, 10, 11.
How many parts do the
17.
teams have? Like, is it as detrimental for an IndyCar crash as it is, an F1 crash?
No, because they're not making all their own parts like in F1. So because you're creating your own parts and fabricating them all on your own as a team, there's definitely a higher cost. So I think in IndyCar, I don't believe, as far as I know, that they've implemented any sort of cost cap. So I think as long as the team is like willing to pay to fix the vehicle and everything. Like, they're good to go. But I don't think that I would not imagine Roman getting or having any issue getting a drive in IndyCar because his performances when he finishes have been so good, and his one lap pace to qualify. I mean, he's had a pole position this season. He's had really good qualifying efforts in a lot of races. It's tough to say whether or not that is like, I feel like the ceiling is high enough to keep him on and just say, hey, if we get some good luck and can string a little bit together, build on this progress and team and driving and whatnot, then I think you've got a good spot or a good position to finish pretty high up.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the double P2 finishes make that conversation a lot different than if it was like, a string of just like P15s, P16s, even when he is finishing. Like, that's just a very mediocre drive in general. And then you got to look for a driver with more upside. But as of right now, it seems okay. And if it just doesn't. Based on what you're saying, it just doesn't seem as costly for the accidents. So maybe, they're able to be a little more forgiving or whatever. But that was a total derail off the Detroit Grand Prix. Continue.
Yeah, well, and it was just, it was a good one to watch overall. I enjoyed checking it out. Like, it is so different from F1, and after watching the Spanish Grand Prix that's got these big massive runoffs and seeing them just weaving through the streets of Detroit with these cement barriers, it was a very stark contrast to what I feel like we're used to in Formula One, but still fun to watch. But to end the race, Alex Palou took P1 and held off Will Power, with Felix Rosenqvist finishing third, and Scott Dixon, who I mentioned earlier for one of the incidents with Grosjean earlier in the season, finished in P4. So
where does Josef Newgarden finish?
Newgarden finished down in P10, so a little ways down. He was having a decent race, but I think it was, if I'm remembering correctly, they were just on a slightly different tire strategy and just didn't quite hook it all up together. But it was definitely a good one, and it's always nice to supplement some F1 with a little extra racing on the weekend.
Of course.
So a good Chevrolet Detroit Grand Prix, but talking a little bit, shifting gears back over to F1, for some of these quick hitters, there was a tweet I saw about Bridgestone, and I guess Bridgestone is looking to get back into the F1 space, but not as a co-tire supplier, I guess, as they had previously. I forget if that was like the 90s or earlier 2000s, where they had both Bridgestone and Pirelli making tires, and the teams could kind of choose. But they're looking to become the sole tire supplier for Formula One, which would be interesting. I guess any large company that's in that space, it makes sense that they would be like, yeah, we want the biggest contract like out there. So I don't think it's like necessarily shocking, but the fact that I feel like Pirelli is such a just mainstay in Formula One, at least from our time watching, and I haven't really seen much else. I think it's interesting. I'm kind of curious what the differences and whatnot would be between tires, and whether they can formulate them to work a bit differently maybe than what Pirelli's been doing. So an interesting thought, but who knows whether or not that will end up happening at any point. Pirelli seems pretty ingrained, but
Yeah, that's a really good word to use for it. I mean, how much of the tire data is informed by previous races, and the only reason that they have that is because they have been a part of, the racing for a long time, so they know maybe where they've gone wrong before, where they can improve, or just like what works in general at certain tracks. So yeah, hard to see a purchase like that or a change like that being a very smooth one, and I'm curious like how you pitch that if you're Bridgestone, in the sense of like what what would they bring to Formula One that Pirelli currently isn't? Like, that'd be the question that I would want answered, in the sense of it feels like the data analysis from Pirelli tends to be pretty good, and to my ear, they've had pretty good understandings of what races will look like based on the compounds that they've chosen. So yeah, just a question of like, I'm curious what Bridgestone specifically believes they could bring.
yeah,
And I know you don't have that answer. Just saying,
well,
from a let's see perspective.
yeah, but I would say that they definitely have some information. So Bridgestone makes the Firestone tires that they use for IndyCar, so they're in that realm already, or they've stayed in that realm since their last time producing
Okay.
tires for F1. They've stayed in the racing world, but I think something that interests me that I've seen come up as a topic a little more frequently recently is the kind of disdain for F1 one-stop strategies that aren't like really a stretch to make it work, because they're the one stop strategies just have a lot less variation. Like we're able to see, and we'll talk about it a little more in the Spanish Grand Prix. But to start the race, we had guys on every which tire. To start, we had softs, mediums, hards. We were raring to go with different strategies. We had multiple pit stops from a number of the teams and everything, and so with IndyCar having more frequent pit stops, changing of tires, I think Bridgestone and their Firestone tires, maybe they have figured out a little bit of a different wear pattern, that if you do say, oh, we want more multi-stop races to add some variation, to bring the team aspect into it a little bit more, in terms of like if you're saying in F1 that the drivers are doing it all on race day, they just have to pit once for tires, whereas in the other instance you can say, well, the pit crew's got to be on it for both stops. They've got to be like figuring out the strategy, because if you pick tires wrong, you could end up in a bad spot, and whatnot. It could add a little more intrigue, when I think some people are looking for that to be added in because of the number of years between both Mercedes and Red Bull of just like one team kind of dominating the standings a bit.
That makes sense to me. The other thing, well, the thing that seems obvious with that though is, why do you need more pit stops? It's because the so basically what you would want is, what you're selecting for is overall softer compounds of tires that like hold up well, I guess, to
I guess,
where
yeah,
you
where
just want
it's
them to dag quicker, actually.
without a danger of
Right.
and I mean, we've seen with Pirelli in some of the races in previous years having just random tire blowouts and things like that. So it's not
I mean, I
that.
imagine any producer could be prone to that, but yeah,
Oh
that's
yeah.
a good thought.
But yeah, I think that if they seem to have figured out a decent way to have like good fall off on the pace of the tires, where you have like really big delta being on the soft tires than the harder tires in IndyCar, where it's noticeable. But if you like flip flop and do the soft tires first, then the hard tire, like it can just shake things up a little bit between windows for pitting and what else. So
Sure.
So an interesting idea, and I think it will be interesting to see what Pirelli brings with the different tires when they bring those to Silverstone later this season, that we've talked about a little bit, whether that changes things a lot or just kind of provides some additional safety. We'll just have to wait and see. But
Right.
but yeah, an interesting concept to see another tire supplier.
Well, it would be very fitting for kind of the era of F1 that it seems like we're kind of on the precipice of. There's a lot of talks of different organizations, different engine suppliers, just different teams in general coming in, slotting into all the different, aspects of vehicle production. So it would be very fitting to. It seems like for this era to say like, we're changing that too. Based on what's going on, I wouldn't really be surprised. I guess my initial whoa was just kind of like, I guess that wasn't even something I had thought of. I was just like,
Hadn't even crossed my
Pirelli
mind
makes
either.
they make the tires. That's what happens. But yeah, I guess everything has a price.
Yeah, and one of those things is the South African, the plans for a South African Grand Prix, unfortunately has been put on hold because of the country. So South Africa has, I guess, closer ties to Russia currently with their political whatnot. And so that has delayed South Africa being added onto the F1 calendar, which is definitely a bummer in terms of that. Maybe there's other African race locations, but like I know we've mentioned before, I think Lewis, Max, a couple other drivers have said it would be neat to add another continent to the racing schedule and everything with Africa. So definitely a tougher situation, but F1 definitely has made their been vocal about how they feel in regards to ties with Russia, including like Mazepin and all previously. So I guess it's not too shocking.
If you're gonna be a bully, you don't get to race on the playground.
Yep. So, or if you're friends with the bully, apparently.
Right.
So that means that the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa most likely will be the track that does stay on the calendar to maintain that spot. So I think that was the biggest competition for it at the time. But then to move on to a little Mercedes talk, it does sound like from reports that George Russell signed a contract extension with Mercedes through 2025. It's also been reported that they are finalizing a deal with Lewis to renew his contract. So all the Ferrari rumors and everything may have been for naught, but
it made for a fun little thought experiment, though.
Oh, yeah. So we'll see once things get announced and solidified, but it sounds like things are moving right along for the Mercedes camp. But one other person outside of those two drivers that was a big help, apparently, I saw that Mick Schumacher was doing a ton of time in the sim with the new car and everything for all the aero to test it out, was up till doing sim time till 2 a.m. leading up till the Spanish Grand Prix and getting some laps in for the boys to share some data and all, And I just, that, it was funny because I feel like that's what a reserve driver's job is. So I'm like, why is he getting all this praise like from Mercedes and like these people for doing it? And I'm like, I guess they're just trying to get him a contract, get him in a car.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like, they're just trying to keep his name in the zeitgeist.
That's what it felt like. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
I feel like I don't hear about any other reserve driver other than Danny Ricciardo because he's Danny Ricciardo, and
Right.
Felipe Drugovich because he's been on a number of the post-race like shows, sitting down with them, talking about
Well,
that as Aston
and
Martin's reserve driver.
right.
So
And I was just gonna follow up on the Aston Martin part of it, where like that's a good one to have on because they are kind of this rising organization. The massive move from from Alpine to Aston Martin with Fernando Alonso. So yeah, that one makes a good amount of sense because Aston Martin itself was in the news a good bit.
yeah, so it makes sense, but I feel like for across the rest of the teams, like you don't hear anything about the reserve drivers.
That's a
So
good
it
point.
stuck out to me. I'm like why is Mercedes like hyping? I'm like they have got to be like just working on finding him a spot back on the grid and everything. Which, hey, I appreciate it. I can't blame them for doing it, but it caught my eye as being a potential like fluff piece to boost his stock a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what that sounds like to me too. Where it's like, yeah, he's just doing his job.
Yeah, but he did it so well for the team, Justin.
Dude, that'd be like if Red Bull came out and was just like, Adrian Newey designed our car.
Yeah.
Whoa, yeah, did he really?
No way.
Yeah.
I don't believe it.
Max will be driving at the Canadian Grand Prix.
What?
Oh, okay.
Color me surprised.
Exactly.
But yeah, I thought that was kind of funny to see. And then to round out my little Mercedes chit chat, they're looking to be bringing and this is something that I also wanted to slightly go off on a small tangent on, but Mercedes is planning to bring a new floor, new rear, new floor, new rear wing, and new front wing for their car to Silverstone. And so big upgrade for Silverstone. And then Fernando Alonso came out and said that Aston Martin is planning on bringing some major updates to Canada and Britain at Silverstone. So my question is, like, do you think that teams target their timelines with upgrades and things for, like, quote unquote home races? Because it seems like Mercedes oftentimes, like, Silverstone is their, like, target. Last year it was, we want to be able to, Lewis saying, I need to see that we're able to start trying to compete for race wins by Silverstone, and, like, wanting to, like, get it for that home race. Making big upgrades or announcing big upgrades that they're going to bring to Silverstone this year. Fernando Alonso saying that they're going to introduce major updates in Canada and Britain. Aston Martin is a British company, so a home race there. Canadian Grand Prix is a home race for Lance Stroll. So, like, it's almost seems like a specific strategy to make these upgrades at bigger, like, races for that specific team. And I can't tell if I'm just reading too much into it and that's just the way that it shook out, or if the teams, like, if that's, like, the timeline and that's just how it happened, or if the teams are like, targeting like, oh, we should bring this upgrade so that we're really like flying at Canada so Lance can like come out and look like a stud at the home race or whatever.
That sounds like it's not reading into it too much. That sounds like definitely conversations that like the marketing teams have and the like publicity teams and the, you know, public outreach teams and this and that. Maybe they all fall under the same umbrella, but you get what I'm saying. I think there is a sense in which you can bring in a large influx of eyes slash fans slash investors on a weekend where you make a big show out of improving your vehicle and then using that to get like a big dub at the home race with
Yeah,
the
like
fans. Like that definitely sounds like something that would be in maybe not the best interest of a team, but a pursuit or a goal worth pursuing.
yeah,
Yes,
it's
I
like
would significantly agree.
okay, because it's yeah, it seemed like it was very coincidental that it would be for these specific races and whatnot.
Yeah,
But
that's a great question.
but yeah, I'd be curious how that like works out because I wouldn't be surprised if there's times when a team are like, yeah, no, we can't wait till this race to like introduce this. We got to do this now because our car needs this issue resolved, and like where that balances out, or if they're like, oh, the car's like fine, so we can like deal with this for another week until this upcoming race and all, and make those changes at that point in time.
Right. Yeah, that, you know, it sounds like it could be a pretty fine dance between not wasting any time and getting the results that you need.
Yeah. So I'd be curious. It's something that was tickling my brain a little bit as I was thinking about it, but starting to kind of get into the race this week just from the practice sessions. We saw a couple things that were interesting. So we saw Mercedes new upgrades with the side pods in action, and we saw that they were able to ride very comfortably close to the ground all of a sudden that they had struggled with a lot compared to Red Bull. There were just watching them go around the track, you could see that the car was very low to the ground, not much rake or just distance, and the car worked pretty smoothly in the practice sessions. And then of course, as we get into the race, it managed itself pretty well during the race day as well. But also leading through the practice sessions, we saw one of the Williams cars go and have to get craned up, and looking at, I don't know if you saw did you see the pictures of the difference between the floors of the Williams car to the Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari?
No, I did not.
Okay, I will send it to you, but essentially the Williams car is so like it just doesn't seem very designed whatsoever. There's a lot of the strakes, I think they're called, under the car missing, or just that like were not built in. The floor is just very plain and lacking, so it does make a lot of sense why they might lack some downforce and whatnot compared to the other cars that we've gotten to see the underbellies of a bit.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it looks like the Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari, it looks like they've all used these, you used the term strakes, like in the floor to like specifically direct different airflows where the what's this, the Williams you were saying?
Yeah, the Williams.
The Williams, yeah, it's not utilizing them like down like the mid or the rear of the car. It looks like it has
A couple
some
at the front.
at
Yeah.
the front. but not even as well integrated as the other three that we mentioned. So yeah, it seems like a lot of what would you say? Uh like a missed opportunity here in development. But then again, this is an example live in action of the budgets that these teams have to work with and the difference, and seeing that, interestingly, Williams, like, they're able to put two cars on the grid. It's like, I'm not going to say competitive, like, to win races, but it at least is quick enough to belong there in that set of 20 cars. So it's interesting that they're able to find pace in other ways. But yeah, obviously not in as a commanding way as these other three. But yeah, that's, I would just say, kind of a live in person example of the differences of the amount of money that these teams are able to spend.
Yeah, and also probably with that little difference in the quality of like engineering, and not to say that Williams engineers suck or anything like
Fucking
that,
stupid.
but I think also like this could be potentially a side effect of years of Williams being kind of behind with the designs and things, where maybe Red Bull and Mercedes had already started and Ferrari had already started doing a little bit of this with the floor for downforce ahead of the new regulations and whatnot. But I'd be curious, now that we've seen some of the different cars, there's these images that the engineers can study and try and figure things out and whatnot, if we'll see some of these other cars like the Williams or Alfa Romeos or whatnot try to utilize some of those same concepts to get a little bit better pace or downforce or whatnot from their cars. Because if some of the other cars that are further down the grid have similar lack of structure on the bottoms of the car, then maybe this will be an opportunity for them to learn some new things and progress with their development as well.
Do you think there would be that wide of an engineering gap that people would see those photos of we'll say the top three cars and be like, holy shit, we didn't even think about slats down there?
I don't know if it's we didn't think about it, but it, like you said, it could be a budget thing, but it could be a budget thing in regard to not necessarily like or even just the like testing and whatnot that has to go through for them to like make sure it's going to work the way they want it to. Gotcha. Like if you don't have or if you're utilizing like wind tunnel time or whatever else on other things and that wasn't as big of a priority, then you may not get the effects you want just by slapping some things on the bottom of the car. And if the engineers could have been like, we're good for now and we'll figure that out later, or something like that, if they're like, this is not part of our main aero focus right now in development, but maybe they have things down the pipeline. But I don't know if it's a massive like gap between engineers, but I'm sure, I mean, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, I would say can probably spend a little bit more on their staff than Williams or Alfa Romeo or Haas.
Sure.
Or that engineers would prefer to go to those teams because they're the most successful teams at the moment. So that could be another reason too.
Yeah, I mean that all of those points make sense to me, but it's interesting to see, just the difference. That to me looks like the difference between LPL and North America.
Looks like a pretty big gap to me too.
Yeah.
But now getting into the actual race weekend, we had a very interesting qualifying session. There was a little bit of rain, chitter chatter over the radios of some wet spots on the track. Some drivers definitely struggling. We weren't aware of it at the time, but Leclerc going out in the first qualifying session and starting P19 affected by some different mechanical issues with the car, was definitely a bit of a stunner right out of the gate. Yuki snuck through into Q2 there, but then we had a pretty just jumbled up grid at the top. I mean, the top 6 in qualifying were all different constructors, and we had 7 different constructors in the top 10 there, which is pretty cool to see. A good mix up towards the top.
Well, and some interesting like positions as well. I would argue a bunch of those positions are like out of position drivers, which is like kind of fascinating at this point in the season. Obviously the what was I going to say? The Mercedes is kind of a standout. We saw them kind of rise through over the practice sessions, but the best they were able to achieve here in the qualifying was the P5 for Lewis, and then P12 for Russell. So yeah, kind of anybody's game there at the top, as you alluded to, with the 1 through 6 being a bunch of different constructors. I mean, I would even argue like Lando. That's surprising to see him
Huge
P3
standout.
Pierre Gasly P4, like wild. So yeah, there's I think this qualifying session was very interesting in that regard.
Yeah, and I think another interesting point, I mean, other than I guess at the time Carlos Sainz up very high in that Q1 qualifying where Leclerc went out, and obviously like I said, we found out later that Leclerc had some car issues, but that was pretty unexpected to see the big gap there. We were talking about it over the weekend as well. Nico Hülkenberg had a really nice qualifying, got himself starting up in P8, and it's just so interesting because his qualifying sessions have just been very, very good throughout the year. I think he's, I'd have to check my numbers, but I believe he's out-qualified Magnussen in the head-to-head battle throughout the season so far, but I don't know if he has beat him out in terms of like race finishes similarly. I think he has a couple more points right now, but otherwise I think Magnussen's been pretty tight there. But that was a decent gap between the two of them. Magnussen going out in Q1 starting P17, and then Hülkenberg, like we said, going all the way to that third qualifying session starting at P8.
Yeah, and when you were messaging me, I was not through the qualifying session yet, so I was like cheering for Hulk the whole time, just like waiting for him to go like P1 or P2 or whatever. But even getting into Q3 and solidifying P8 was very impressive as well. And I think it is these glimmers from just the organization from Haas, giving Hülkenberg the vehicle that's able to allow him to achieve those results. And it's these glimmers from Haas that we've been seeing of like some true pace starting to emerge, and I think they're like right on the precipice of being a team that we're going to consistently talk about in the midfield, where they've I think they've really shown some promise here over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think we've seen a good bit of progress from them to even be fighting up in that for Q3. It's not how we would have necessarily expected from the start of the season. So it's fun to see them up there battling a little bit more for some good positions. So
yeah, because I mean, like when especially when I first came in as a Formula One fan, like Haas was just the team that you laughed at, that had like a really endearing team principle, and that's like the only reason you'd be talking about them. And now I think they've really kind of have made some serious progress. I understand Haas had some success early on, but
yeah, I mean, it's good to see them kind of turning a corner, and this is what I think this year, after seeing Red Bull kind of running away at the front, I think the hope from my end was that there would be good competition and that the field would close up and also raise up towards Red Bull to hopefully bring more competition next year. I think I saw last week that Max had said in an interview that he thinks that the longer the rules stay the same, the better off it is for competition in F1 because the improvements and everything that teams are making and all are much more marginal, which allows all of the teams to kind of close that gap a little bit as they figure things out. But with the recent changes, I mean, even the Mercedes era, they stayed ahead of the game and all for that turbo hybrid era and just were able to maintain that top position. But I do think that teams seem to be like closing that gap up later on in that, of course, with like Red Bull coming up and Max getting the Drivers' Championship in 2021 and having more of that competition. We saw that in effect as that time period went longer and longer. I think if we had stayed in the turbo hybrid era without the regulation changes in 2022, maybe we would have seen more teams like up there fighting for that top of the grid. So I think this year, in my mind, is a little bit about that gap being closed from or raising the floor, as it were, instead of raising the roof.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, it gives teams, and then also it makes the development that they're doing now meaningful, where it doesn't just like immediately just flip on its head quickly after, and then you gotta effectively you don't want to just like move the goalpost, right? You want to
or cause people to just start from scratch and say, good luck, build me a car.
Right, because then it's going to default to the teams with the most money just having like a significant edge, and that just creates what we have now.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see as we progress. But like we were saying, this week it was great to see a huge mix up throughout the grid. We unfortunately did see our friend Mr. Pierre Gasly get a couple of penalties for blocking drivers. I did find it pretty interesting too, watching the radio rewind for the weekend. Fernando Alonso saw Pierre block Max during the one qualifying session and everything, and you just hear Alonso go to his team and like it. I didn't consider it coming from like other teams, like calling out something that is not like in my mind didn't affect them. Like Pierre blocking Max doesn't help or hurt Checo in my mind, or sorry, help or hurt Alonso in my mind. But Alonso's like, oh, if Pierre finishes above me on the grid, I got to make sure I relay that this happened. So he's on the radio going to his team. Oh, yeah. Gasly blocked Verstappen. That'll be 3 places is like what he said over the radio. And we end up seeing Pierre get the 3-place grid penalty for that. And then another 3 for blocking. I forget who the other one was. It might have been Sainz or one of the Ferraris. I don't quite remember. But a tough start for Pierre, dropping down to P10 for that starting position after a really good P4 qualifying.
Yeah, and then unfortunately in the race, not really able to improve his position anymore after those penalties were applied. Yeah. Still in the points, but just the lonely number one. Yeah,
and also I guess the other side that recollected after it had crossed my mind earlier, but I'm sure Alonso was also looking at it, maybe not in just Pierre it might be above me in qualifying, but also Alpine is one of our bigger competitions, and calling them out on something to benefit his team as well.
Yeah, big time.
But then, of course, the other qualifying final little incident. So I looked back to see our lovely little Mercedes scrap that we saw during qualifying, and so I was wrong when you and I were talking, but George was the lead car, but Lewis was had DRS, had the slipstream, and was trying to kind of go around him, and George just drifted to the side and pushed Hamilton off onto the grass, and caused a little bit of damage to the carbon fiber on his car. So it was I was correct where it was George in that whole time as he's closing Lewis into the grass and everything, with either not knowing or whatever else, or trying to force him out of a faster qualifying time. George didn't let off the gas that whole time, because that's where his DRS stayed open. He was just full guns to it, pushing Lewis off onto the side. So definitely a interesting moment, but of course didn't turn into any penalties or anything for the race.
No penalties, but seeing drivers slide off into the grass isn't an exciting one, you have to say, especially like going down into a braking zone like that. Things could get hairy.
Yeah, but we ended up with a still pretty mixed up starting grid, and I guess we were looking at Sunday. There were announcements of there may be rain, there may be this or that. They always like to tease it, just to make us wonder if it's going to get shaken up like we saw in Monaco. And then, of course, as the race got started, we had George going, is that rain? No, it's just my sweat on the inside of my visor. And so George kind of baited us even a little bit more. But unfortunately, at the start, we also saw Lando get taken out, have some contact, drop back to the back of the grid, and have to kind of fight his way back through after a P3 start. A big bummer. I was really excited to see him hopefully get in the points again for another week and have a good showing, but it did not shake out that way for the young boy Lando.
Yeah, it would have been nice to actually see him drive a race. It feels like so many of his weekends are just relegated into, this is where he is. He's just driving between two other vehicles, and that's about it. I think if he was able to keep that P3 start without taking damage, we would have seen him actually like go to work, and I think that would have
defending
been
and
fun.
like really, right. Yeah, like I agree. But I mean, it's exciting to see that he had the pace to get that finish. Like, he was shocked. Sure. On the team radio after qualifying, they were like P3, and he's like, what? And they're like, yeah, you're still P3, because I think he was, and then he put in another lap, and people were finishing behind him and whatnot. And he's like, what? Like with a little high pitched, little squeak to it, because he was funny. Confused. He was like, wait, really? we're still P3. So a solid drive from Lando for the qualifying, but yeah, didn't shake out in the race, and he was able to get a couple of places back, but after that start, it was a pretty long and tough fight for him throughout. But I guess the other big shock early in the race for me was Leclerc coming in to pit for after being on the hard tires to start at lap 17 coming in.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I totally understood that. Explain the strategy choice there.
Well, with the race being I think it was 70. Oh, let me double check. Or 66 laps. They were expecting I think the medium tires to last like in the 20 lap range.
Okay.
And so starting on the hard tires, you're assuming that he's gonna go and put in this like big stint at the beginning, like 30, 40 laps and whatnot, into the race before he pits, where like Max, for instance, looking at the pit stop strategy, we had so we had Leclerc pitting on lap 16 off of the hard tires to put on soft tires, where Max was on the soft tires to start and didn't pit till lap 26. So Max lasted 10 laps longer on the soft tires. Like the whole point of starting on the hard tires is to like stay out there longer without pitting and like find a pit window, maybe make up some positions on pit strategy and whatnot. The soft tire people pitting before you just hang out there as long as you can. And they were coming in way sooner. So it was just a bit odd for the strategy, because otherwise it's like, if you're only going to drive 16 laps on these tires, put the soft tires on, because you'll just be faster for those 16 laps. Like, you're kind of wasting it, where if you drive the soft tires to 26 laps like Max did, at that point the hard tires should be much faster than the softs that are like have had a lot of dag and are worn and need to go. The hard tires should still be kicking pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the radio messages would have been like, but there's a sense in which, what if they had what if the problem started like before the race, where they didn't understand what tires were going to be the best, so they, get a bunch of laps in, hope they're going to be able to improve their position, make some overtakes, the lap time just isn't there, and instead of like taking that sunk cost immediately, and pitting like right when they saw the lap time not be there, then pit, instead of, like you're saying, waiting to 16 and then just doing something totally suboptimally. I'm willing to bet that feels like a misread of what their lap times were going to be on that tire, and he just wasn't able to improve his position to the degree that warranted that tire choice, and then they just swapped them too late.
Yeah, I mean, it's I get what you mean. I think it might have been a bad read, but I also think Ferrari's strategy is still having some issues. Later on for the second pit stop that Leclerc did, he was during the radio messages, he was like, "Oh, I want to go on the soft tires." Then his pit wall was like, "Oh no, we want to put you back on the hard tires." That didn't work, and Leclerc was like, "No, I want the soft tires." And the pit wall was like, "Okay, yeah, we'll give you what you want." And then they put the hard tires on anyway. So it seems
that's fucked up.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we've seen that before, and I thought it was fucked up at the time, too. We saw it with Mercedes a couple years ago. We would see Valtteri go, "Hey, put me on the opposite of whatever Lewis gets in terms of tires. If he goes for the medium tires, I want the hards." Or they're both starting on mediums, and he's like, "If he goes for the softs, I want the hard tires." And then the team's like, "Nope, this is the optimal strategy. We're putting you both on the same thing." And it's like, I understand the team wanting to have the optimal performance, but you do have to like give some weight to like what your driver is saying. Like they're the ones who can feel the difference between the different tires and whatnot a bit better than you can from just watching on the pit wall and looking at lap times. So
Yeah, that sounds like trying to, man, not lose any more than they already have. Where if you would have given Charles the soft tires, maybe you would have been able to get a little X factor out of him, improve his position a little bit more. But yeah, that just sounds like a rough day from the pit wall.
yeah, it's weird. To me, it's like they're so afraid of making a mistake that they just like force whatever their plan is, and if it doesn't work, then they're like, "Well, everyone already thinks we're a joke." So, like, it's not different where they're not necessarily like they're more trying to avoid failure than they are trying to be successful. By they're trying to just go with whatever seems like it should be the best instead of being like, well, maybe we take a chance on this based on what our driver's saying, based on this or that, and being a little riskier. It seems more of a like damage mitigation strategy from the
For
pit
sure.
wall. So a tough day for Leclerc. He ends up not making it back into the points. Fights his way from P19 up to P11. I think he probably was still having some of the issues from qualifying. I know they swapped out some parts, but weren't able to fully give, I think, a full shakedown of the issues with the car before the race day. So a tough one and a big hit for him, where especially with Carlos finishing up in P5, getting some more points on that end for the Ferrari team. It's going to just make it tougher on Leclerc. Like it hurts to take a 0 on a weekend, especially one that you finish all the way through the race when you're kind of trying to fight for the top. He's now 16 points back from Carlos, who has 58 points to his 42. He's down in P7 with Alonso and both Mercedes ahead of him and Carlos. So not what we would be looking for Leclerc, and I think what Ferrari would be looking for.
Yeah, that's a really tough weekend. But even for Carlos, like didn't he started on the front row with Max and just kind of like faded away into P5 like 45 seconds back from Max. So
And I
I would
mean, I he didn't make much of an impression, but at the same time, having the two Mercedes, who I think we saw have better pace on the weekend, and then Checo pass him, and that's the only, like, he was able to hold off Stroll and Alonso. So I think in that sense, I don't necessarily feel like I feel like that was a like solid weekend for Carlos. I think that's like he finished where he probably was supposed to kind of weekend.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're saying maybe the Mercedes had a little bit too much, and Sergio in the Red Bull was like gonna pass him if he made it up that far.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I think even if he could have very easily just have started P5 anyway and just not like not gone up, not gone down through the like if he had qualified
Okay.
P5, I think that's probably where he would have finished. Instead, even though he finished like started P2, I just don't know if the Ferrari had. It definitely didn't have better pace than the Red Bull, and the Mercedes also seemed to have better pace. Checo finishing P4 just was because he was kind of fighting his way through all day. So
Okay. All right. You've changed my mind.
yeah, I think that it was like I just don't think it wasn't an amazing performance from Carlos or anything, but I think he did like the best that he could on the day, and with that, I think that's all you can kind of do. Some weeks you don't have the pace.
Yeah, of course, and especially like with the Mercedes on the rise, with Lewis and George finishing really well. Yeah, I think you're right. Probably speaks more to the Mercedes weekend than like anything Carlos or the Ferrari pit wall was doing wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely not the ideal for Ferrari on either driver, but they've got some progress that they need to make. I was pretty disappointed to see Yuki end up getting that penalty for the incident with, I think it was Ocon coming out of the pit lanes. If I remember,
Zhou Guanyu.
Zhou. Okay, so yeah, with Zhou Guanyu, because I don't think he did enough to warrant a 5-second penalty, and to knock him from being up in P9 down out of the points, that's pretty frustrating. I think both of us are I know you always were, but I'm turning into a pretty big Yuki fan too. I'm like rooting for him a lot.
Yeah, I want to see him do well.
Yeah, and I'm with you
there. That
there.
looked like a dive from Joe, to be fair. It looked like he was just like quick to take the exit road. He knew it was there. If he gets on the radio, so I think it looked a little bit worse for Joe than it really was. And yeah, I think it really hampers Tsunoda's weekend there.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought we were gonna break the little spell. He was gonna get a couple of points this weekend instead of just the one. But between the end of Monaco with the brake issues that they had and losing those positions, and then with the 5-second penalty, I'm bummed in back-to-back weeks for Yuki. So hopefully, but at the same time, I'm looking at it and I'm like, he's shown that he can get that car in the points. Like, that's awesome. But I just want him to get those points finishes and not have these late issues.
Yeah, and it seems like a little bit of some of it just seems like experience issues. Some of it, feels like car issues. But yeah, I think just the more like good weekends that he has, I think he's going to have a lot more drives ahead of him, and then we'll just continue to see him improve. Because it seems like he has pretty solid raw talent, pretty good awareness here. But situations like this are really going to hamper him for someone who tends to be relatively consistent.
Yeah, and has like really built that consistency up over the past couple years. It's like he's made a lot of progress with that, and so to see it sort of not pay off a couple of times is a bummer. But the only other note that I had in on the actual race was I just found it pretty amusing. It's funny watching Fernando be right behind Lance, because he always is like on the radio, like, I'm not going to press Lance, I'm not going to pass him, like, and they don't have pressure from any other teams really that have forced him to like be like, yeah, this guy's on my ass, like, I need to get past him, otherwise I'm going to get overtaken. Like, even on the last lap, he was only a second behind Lance, or 0.8 of a second behind him. And as he's coming through the last turns, Fernando was like waving to the crowd at his home Grand Prix as he's coming through the last like couple turns of the track, instead of like going after Lance to try and beat him out. But I mean, I think that's just smart on Fernando's part as for his seat and everything to be a team player, but also just like for the team, like trying to maximize the points. He's like, hey, let's get as many as we can get. I'm still ahead in the teammate battle with points, right. So like let's just not cause any issues and take as many points as we can get.
Well, and you get to ham up the love from the crowd. I mean, that's
And
yeah,
it's
I think
at
that's
home,
fine.
like
Pretty
that's
sporting, if you ask me.
sporting and like probably fun for him too. Like
Yeah,
he's
exactly.
probably like just loving all the applause and everything from the Spanish fans. So a cool weekend for him and for Carlos being a home Grand Prix and having a nice finish too. So
Yeah, I agree. I think it's I think it's nice to see drivers have success on their home weekends. The only other thing that I wanted to add in was just mention the Alpine squad. We had Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly finish P8 and P10. I think that's like an improvement from some of the positions that we have seen them in. We've actually like seen Alpine finish much farther down the grid in some of these races. This is coming post a couple of upgrades, so it's nice to see that those are working for the Alpines. I think in some of the next races coming up, we may see some better points finishes from them. But good to see that they're slurping them up here. I like to see Pierre Gasly have a good drive.
yeah, I'm with you there, and it's they're kind of in no man's land, but like those points are super important. I mean, they're 60 points back from Ferrari in the constructors, but they're 23 ahead of McLaren, and it doesn't seem like that gap beneath them will probably close up very much. Whether McLaren or Haas or Alfa Romeo, I don't imagine any of them like really pressing Alpine, but I also don't necessarily see Alpine making up a 60-point gap over the next however many races we have, 16 races or so we have left. So it'll be interesting to see how close they finish on either side, kind of, or if they just kind of maintain that median gap between the kind of being a midfield of their own. But
yeah, but even if that is where they finish, that would mean that they continued like a linear path upward, because like you still have to figure all of the other teams are bringing in upgrades too.
yeah.
Like their success isn't coming in a vacuum. So yeah, I like seeing Ocon and Pierre able to like get these type of results as opposed to just like, you know, relegating them to the back where they've had on other outfits some pretty solid performances that like you would love to see them get back to. I mean, it was just last race that we saw Ocon on the podium.
Yeah,
So that's pretty cool.
definitely cool.
Big time wading into the waters there. I didn't want to be wrong.
No, you're spot on, and I mean having that and like also a back-to-back points weekend for the team is definitely a nice improvement from teammates running into each other and the other early struggles that they had. But yeah, props to Alpine, and I'm looking forward to seeing like how that progresses. And like you said, always rooting for Pierre Gasly to have a good weekend. So hopefully he'll continue to put some nice laps in and nice weekends in going forward. Sure. But the I guess the only other big like thing, I had a couple other final notes, but of course I'd be remiss if I didn't end with some max stats, and this one is much more simple than usual. First in FP1, first in FP2, first in FP3, first in qualifying, first in the race, fastest lap, led every lap. It's like a super grand slam of a weekend. He just was like on a different playing field throughout the weekend. It felt like we saw him put in a qualifying time that was like 5/10 up on the second place qualifier. In the race, he's getting the black and white flag waved at him for going outside the track limits, and then he's talking to his engineer and going, "Oh, what's the fastest lap?" And they're like, "Just bring it home, Max." He's like, "No, but what's the fastest lap?" And they're like, "It's this." And he just like crushes it and is like, "Okay." And they're like, "Okay, now can you just like finish the race?" And he's like, "Yeah, I guess so." So that was pretty entertaining. He like beat it out by 3/10 on the at the end for the fastest lap.
Damn.
So it wasn't even like, he didn't just like snake it out. He's just like, "Oh no, like I can do this," and went on his way. But that was entertaining as well. I would definitely, for anyone who watched the race and hasn't watched the radio rewind, check it out on F1 page on YouTube. Like that, it's fun hearing all the team radio messages and things like that. That you're just like come on, dude. Like you're kind of ridiculous. He's like, I don't care if I, and I get from the team perspective. They're like, there has been talk about rain all weekend. If it does rain, or if there is a safety car from some incident or whatever, and you end up with a 5-second penalty with a safety car restart, like you could easily lose that P1 for no reason. But Max is a bit stubborn, as I think we've seen. So he was not going to take that lying down.
Wants to get all of the points possible. You can't blame him. That's pretty funny. The Super Grand Slam weekend. I'm surprised they don't give hand out points for something like that. Where if you top all of the sessions, they'll give you something else. That's like a surprise that they don't.
Yeah.
Not saying it's necessary. Not saying I care, but other than just having like a term for it, it'd be cool if that actually like meant something in
like
the
for
championship.
As opposed to just like a record potentially for to keep of, oh, this person has X number of Grand Slams in their career or whatnot. But the other like just interesting point about the weekend, so 4 drivers came in who had not or who had completed every lap of the season thus far. So Max, Fernando, Lewis, and Carlos had all been the 4 drivers who had made it through every lap of every race up until this point. And then we ended up with a race with no yellow flags, no safety cars, no red flags, and no retirements. So, so those 4 have continued their streak of completing every race this season without any incidents and whatnot. But it's kind of nice to see another race weekend where we have no issues. It's just good, clean racing, as you and I always root for, and to see that shake out pretty well for all the drivers, get some good data for teams, even if they aren't in the points, and hopefully, like we said, close that gap up a little bit.
Yeah, I think, and especially for overall, I think it was a decent Grand Prix. Maybe not the most exciting or safety car involved or whatever, but yeah, I would say just a pretty maybe quiet race, if you will. I know there was a decent amount of overtakes, but nothing crazy happened, no significant amount of jeopardy. So yeah, just a pretty solid race for the 2023 season.
Yeah, so big props to everyone for keeping it inside the lines as much as they can. No incidents or big incidents throughout the race day and everything. You love to see it, but we can, I guess, start shifting over to a little League of Legends talk. We've not got too much, I don't think, on the agenda. I did want to briefly just mention the LCS player kind of walkout and whatnot. They are still, I guess, in deliberation, figuring out what the plan is going forward entirely. it was interesting though, because Double Lift got kind of I wouldn't say put on blast, but he was getting criticized by a couple of the F1, or not F1, the League of Legends pundits, I guess at this point. Like, I Will Dominate was kind of talking about him a bit, because Double Lift in one of his streams this past week basically said, oh, if it comes to a walkout or not having the opportunity to potentially go to Worlds, like, I'm playing. And it's like, so Riot wins. Like, they just, like, they can do whatever they want, because he's like, he just gave up the leverage that they have of, like, you need us to put on this performance to make you money, to draw eyes to the game, to grow the American user base, to get people to want to buy skins and play, or whatever else or watch streams and watch ads that makes Riot money. Like, the players have to be there for them to do that, for a lot of it at least, or to keep the attention of people, and to just come out and be like, to the public, and not like, just keep that in, man. Like, you may feel that way, like, if push comes to shove, like, I'm playing, but while deliberations are going on and you're trying to like use that leverage a little bit to just be like, yeah, but like, I'm just gonna play because I want to go to Worlds, like, that just screws the entire point of this in the first place. If Riot is just like, oh, well, like, all we had to do was put this pressure on, and then they'll just, like, cave. That is kind of... that is not the number one strategy in negotiations, I would say. I wouldn't hire Double Lift as my my negotiator for anything. Hostage situations, buying a house, buying a car. Like, Double Lift, you can stay as far away as possible.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. He just gives up the goose on stream, and in like a pretty salty fashion, and to the degree that I'm not even sure he understands like the full complexity of the issue. Not saying I do, but he's just like very flippant about it, and that's kind of a big shame. Because unfortunately, let's be real, Double Lift. Like, even if you do get to Worlds, like, this isn't a hot take, but you're not going to win. Like, it's not going to mean anything. And all it's going to be is another year where, like, oh, shit, what you actually should have done was maybe put work into, like, your home scene, and then... Yeah, maybe like, it's not you that gets to like succeed at Worlds, but maybe it's like your countrymen that get to succeed at Worlds.
You lay the groundwork, like,
yeah, exactly. And he doesn't want to do that. I would imagine him as a player believes he's already done that kind of thing, and he wants his big fucking trophy. But overall, man, he's not gonna be the one that wins it.
Well, and to look at it that way, and also like, it's a little disappointing to me from Double Lift, because he has a history for his entire career of just trying to jam as much of his foot into his mouth as possible. I mean, in Season 2, I think it was, or Season 1, right after the first World Championships or second World Championships, he was like, Korea and China will never catch up to North America because we've been playing this game for a year longer than them. And it's like, all right. And only Asian countries have won Worlds since. Like, it's like, come on, man. Like, you, at this point, I'm rooting for some growth to be like, hey, maybe I don't have to say every thought that comes into my brain. Maybe I can just hold this in and wait it out. But Yeah, a little disappointing to see in that. And like you said, so flippant. It reminded me a lot of a couple of years ago. There was almost a lockout for the NFL
Gotcha.
in America with the teams because they were looking to add a 17th game to the schedule. And
Hmm.
so the conversation was like, there's a ton of players that are young who have not been in the league for much longer that were like, hey, like this is a higher injury risk to me. Like the NFL doesn't have a long longevity for the average player in general. And so now you're going to subject me to playing another game of like pounding on my body and everything out there against the other teams. You bet like they were fighting to be paid basically whatever their salary is, like if you broke it down into a per game, like to
Hmm.
add an extra one of that for the additional game, all these things. And then there were the long-standing players, the Aaron Rodgers and these other guys in the that have been around for a decade in the league who have hundreds of millions of dollars that were just like, I just don't want, like, I don't get why we have all these demands for the NFL. Like, my life's pretty fucking good. And it's like,
Right.
but it's not about you. It's about,
Hmm.
like, the grand scheme of things. Like, not
Getting
every
everybody
player,
fed.
not everyone in the NFL is you making $30 million a year. There's the
Right.
guy that just came out of college, and NFL players, something I learned through all this, they aren't vested in like making money from the NFL and everything and for their like retirements and pensions and whatnot until they've played for like 5 years. I think it is. So like
Crazy.
most players don't make it that long
Right.
anyway.
And they probably build it that way.
And so for a
Oh.
guy who's like already vested, making shit tons of money to
Right.
just it that's what it reminded me of from Double If being like, well yeah, like my bank account's looking all right, so like I don't get why, as opposed to being like, oh, I don't know, 30 players or however many players just lost their jobs who are good quality players or could be the next me. Why don't I put my pride aside and say I'm going to like vouch and vie for these guys so that, I don't know, maybe North America could win worlds down the road, like you're saying.
Right.
Like, it's frustrating because it's like it's not a great situation. I think it was very flippant from Riot to just say, well, yeah, teams, if you want to like get rid of your academy teams, like you can if you want to, like halfway through the year. At least get to the end of the year before you're like, okay, we're going to look to restructure our academy or challenger scene or whatever for next year. Current thing isn't working. We want to do something that's going to be better financially for teams and like look to grow that pool of
Hmm.
talent and yada yada yada, like instead of, yeah, just halfway through. So it's bad on every angle in my opinion. But I guess probably by next week we'll have some semblance of a resolution for what we're going to be looking at, because that will be right around that 2 week point of
Hmm.
negotiations and whatnot. So
Yeah, and resolution could be no NALCS this year, but we do have some LPL games and LCK games kicked off. We have, they're into, what am I saying? Into the summer split there, which leads into, which will lead into the Worlds tournament. So as the competition ramps up, we'll bring you coverage of the LPL and the LCK. The LEC, or I guess like the European region, hasn't started yet either. So it's just LPL and LCK. Couple of good matches over there have been played so far. One team in the LPL undefeated, I believe Billy Gaming is.
They are, after
So
their hot
that's
stretch at MSI,
yeah.
carrying it through into the start where their biggest competition with JDG ended up falling 2-0 to Weibo Gaming in one of their first three matchups. So JDG's at 2-1 in the standings right now. Where Billy Gaming, like you said, has continued that, and Team WE is also undefeated at 2-0, where Billy Gaming's at 3-0, like you mentioned.
They've just had, I guess, one more series in their schedule so far.
Yeah,
And then over in the LCK, we've only had two of the matchups so far. Interestingly, D plus Kia, I'm not even sure if that's how you say their name this year, but Damwon D
Yep,
plus
you're right.
starts off with a dub, which I'm happy to see. Pretty sure lineup stays the same as spring. So the D plus that we know. So nice
Yep.
to see them come out. See them come out with an early win where we saw them kind of struggle as we got into the playoff stages of spring. But yeah, just a couple little updates there for LPL and LCK, and then as the split moves forward, we'll bring you like more in-depth coverage of some of the specific matchups. But yeah, it just seemed more beneficial to talk about the lockup this week, or the walkout this week, because yeah, double if like you said, just foot in his mouth. It's just kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving into next week, I'm gonna look forward to getting some good League of Legends matches in.
Yeah, and a big one coming up this weekend to check out. If you want to be up at 4:30 Eastern Standard Time, you've
Oh
got
yeah.
LCK on Sunday, Gen G versus T1. So a nice little
Ooh.
head-to-head going to start off the summer split here. Gen G and T1 will both just have had one series. T1 plays Hanwha Life and Gen G plays KT Rolster. So two decent matchups in their own right earlier in the week on Friday, but the big head to head coming up on Sunday between the two to kick off the first week of LCK there.
Yeah, that'll be exciting for sure. Because honestly, like we've had so many matchups between Faker and Chovy, like in recent memory now, that there's actually like a really significant um kind of like best of five meta
Yeah.
that you can kind of draw from. So yeah, I think that matchup's going to be really exciting because it's just fun watching. I mean, big two massive organizations, bunch of star players going head to head. It's always a good matchup. So that you said that Sunday morning.
Yep, Sunday
Hell
morning,
yeah,
4:30 Eastern Standard Time. So
there you
check it
go.
out or watch the VODs later, like I'll be doing.
Right, like normal fucking people.
Yeah, like people without insomnia. But if you have
Sure.
insomnia, that's the matchup for you. I digress. League of Legends will have more of it coming, but you have a little bit of Magic the Gathering that you wanted to talk about before we get over to the flavor of the week here.
Yeah, I guess just kind of like sprinkle some stuff in from the weekend. Wizards has been spoiling. It's like it's less that and more just like pre-release. It's like an early reveal of the set like before the release weekend. So it's a Lord of the Rings themed set that has a commander product component and then a like straight to modern release. So the cards will all be modern legal. Not Yeah, they'll be modern legal, and as the like spoilers reveals roll in, you see familiar characters that you love from the stories and the films. There's Aragorn, there's a bunch of like Gandalf prints, and it seems like a bunch of different versions of some characters that have kind of different stages in the stories where you have like Gandalf the White, Gandalf the Gray, and they each do, I guess, what you would say mechanically different things. You see,
Interesting.
Gollum's got cards, Sam, Frodo, literally everybody. All of the flavor text, it seems like, are passages from the stories. So kind of putting an image to a piece of literature from the story. Most of it looks really cool so far.
When did it come out already, or is it coming out?
I believe the pre-release is next weekend. I want to say pre-release is next weekend, and then the full release would be the following. So I guess like full release in 2 weeks. It seems like 2.5 weeks it would be.
So I should order a box, is what you're telling me.
If you're a Lord of the Rings fan and you even sniff of a lick enjoy magic, it would be a pretty cool set to get into.
It's tough, man, because let me tell you, I'm looking at it right now, and I think it's gonna have a ton of resale value, like unopened. Like, I think I might buy a box and just hang on to it because, one, Lord of the Rings is just such a huge, massive fandom that it doesn't make sense to or it does make sense to kind of look to buy as a potential resale down the line. But also, what I'm seeing here is that it looks like the One Ring card that is in the set is extremely sought after, where there's someone who I think has said that the value could be up to $1 million. I don't know if so it's a one of one card.
Yeah. And there have been a couple of people that have offered pretty large bounties for it. I'm sure you know the name Cassius Marsh, NFL player.
Yep, I recognize the name.
Yeah, he's offered $500,000 to anybody that pulls that one of one ring. So like the longer that goes unpulled, the value of some of those boxes is going to go up significantly.
So, I kind of would hope to buy the box, but even then, I think the box will raise in value just because of the pure collector's value of it from a Lord of the Rings perspective, along with so I don't know. Maybe I'll be dipping my toes back into trying to buy a box. Last time I didn't get quite the resale value I was hoping, but it was worth testing the waters. It wasn't and now I have a bunch of cards. I've got some greens and some blacks. I think that I could, mostly fungi deck that I could put together.
Unfortunately, I don't think there would be any fungus in the
so this would be
Lord of the Rings set.
This would be a resale purchase as opposed to
leave it up on the shelf sealed.
Yeah, but if there are any future green and black primary booster boxes, it might be worthwhile to check out, see if I can make a little deck over here.
Bro, that would be exciting.
Get myself
to have you build
on
a commander deck.
So
you can purge through my collection if you want.
I may take you up on that at some point, because I've got a decent start with the cards I have, in terms of just numbers of cards. I haven't really gone through all of them in terms of creating a strategy and whatnot. But since they're all from one booster box, they all work decently well together.
For sure. Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, with all my my slivers. I've got so many slivers, man.
Gotcha. There you go. So yeah, I just think Lord of the Rings new set looks really cool. Some of the art direction is very exciting.
Looks pretty sweet.
Yeah. So I think it'll just be a fun set to get into. likely try and crack a couple packs from the LGS. But yeah, and then a lot of my weekend we were watching some of the games from the IM Dallas. Had a bunch of, I guess it was like a bunch of North American orgs, basically just like small little tournaments. That was pretty fun. But one thing about it, interestingly, like a bunch of the like top teams that you would have guessed like would have made it all the way through. Some of them end up getting knocked out into the quarters. Some of them end up getting knocked out in the semifinals. So you actually have, and I'm gonna say the two teams that were in the finals, and you're just gonna be like, what? So it was Mouse versus Ents in the finals.
Okay.
In a bracket that had FaZe, Heroic, Cloud9. I'm pretty sure G2 was there. I think Furia played as well. And that was the final. Mouse versus Ents.
Interesting.
It was over in 2 games. Ents wins 2-0.
It's kind of a bummer. I was going to say, Mouse, I feel like, has been in a lot of tournaments. I've seen them frequently, but I haven't seen a ton of success from them.
Not recently, no.
Where Ents, they've been decent for a bit. But, like, yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. Definitely a shocker for the finals. I wouldn't have, if you had listed off all those teams, I would not have, probably would have said, like, Furia versus Heroic or like FaZe versus Heroic or something that we've seen previously, basically.
Right, bro, and I was tuned in to the I think it was Heroic in the semifinals against, I think they played Mouse, and I was just thinking like, all right, here we go, Cadian back in the finals, but yeah, not to be. So any of the players that I was tuned in to watch did not make it to Championship Sunday. But yeah, overall, it was still a pretty fun tournament. I think if you think about the like calendar and the schedule, you could probably argue some of these teams are pretty fucking worked after. I think it was like Rio, the like qualifiers for Paris, and then Paris was a massive tournament. So I think the argument could be made that some of these teams are feeling pretty lethargic, maybe pretty fatigued, feeling kind of out of strats, where, you know, if they use them all for main stage at Paris, like, well, what else do you have, kind of thing. So a couple of factors coming in, but yeah, so I am Dallas. I think of the S tier tournaments that we've watched recently, hasn't been the best as far as the grand finals, but interesting that the competition is in a way where it's kind of anybody's game, where you can have a bunch of different teams be possible to win one of these tournaments. So I think that's pretty cool. And then we just have some group stage games for the Blast Spring Finals. So this is the culmination of what was like their main season at Blast. I don't know exactly what it is, but the league the league is the Blast, so I'm pretty sure this is like the playoff stage for that. So you have the groups going on. So just a lot of CS over the weekend. So that and some, you know, Magic the Gathering releases. But sir, that's kind of it for that. If you want to take us through your flavor of the week here and get these people out of here.
Yeah, sounds good. So for my food this week, Colleen and I, Sunday night after the F1 race and all, we went on a first date anniversary date night. So our first date was on June 4th 2 years ago. So we decided to celebrate that by going out and doing a nice dinner. So we went to a restaurant in Philly called Laser Wolf, which is a Israeli restaurant. Like, food was much more chill than I expected with the name, but it was the food was phenomenal. I had these just great lamb chops. There was like all sorts of, like, they do a whole little spread of like hummus and dips and like little like veggies and whatnot. So that was just delicious, and it was a nice little way to celebrate our first time meeting a couple years ago. For my music this week, I delved back a little bit into a couple of older artists that I had listened to. So Catastro, which is like an indie rock group that I had listened to a lot a couple years ago. It's a little different of a vibe, a little like it's indie, but the guitar sounds are a little twangy, but not country twangy. It's hard to explain, but they've got a unique sound a bit. Like, what were you gonna?
Like a bluegrass, like folky kind?
No, it's like indie, like pop rock, but the guitars are definitely a little less fine-tuned, I guess, almost. That it sounds a little like rougher, maybe. But I enjoyed them a lot, and so they came back. I came back across them. I remembered that they were a thing because my brain just sometimes lets some of those artists go over time.
Yeah.
And then Borns, who are a bit more of like a melodic electronic music. So was listening to a little bit of both of those this past week. And then for my visual medium on Friday, I saw the new Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse animated movie. I loved it. The first one was really good a couple years ago when that came out with the Miles Morales story and everything. I think it was Into the Spider-Verse, or just might have been just Spider-Verse, but the movie was really good. The only qualm I had with it was it stopped like right at the it ended right before what I would have imagined would be the final like climax of the movie, where the big boss fights and everything kind of happen. It was like, these things are about to happen next week on Dragon Ball Z. And I was like, wait, that's the end of the movie? I was like trying to, in my brain even afterwards, be like, how should they have ended this movie if that was like the time that they had, or ending point or whatever, to lead into the next one? Because it just, everything was great about it. It's just, I feel like it's going to be a very weird spot to pick up for the next movie. Like, I don't feel like there's any room really for a even like short intro to the next movie before you're just like at action. Like, I feel like everything was just right where it's going to turn into immediate big battles, which is an interesting way to kick off a movie. I feel like you need a little.
Nothing wrong with a two-parter.
No, but I feel like even in in the Harry Potter Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2, like Deathly Hallows Part 2 doesn't start with them just being like, and fight, with the like everyone from Hogwarts just running out onto the bridge to start fighting all the Dementors and everything. Like there's still some build up to it, and I'm curious to see where they bring that in the next movie, because just based on how it cut off, I don't feel like there's much wiggle room to like. Maybe, I don't know, maybe do a little flashback at the start to like ease everyone into the movie or something. Or someone shows up 5 minutes late to the movie and they're going to miss the big fight scenes for it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe they've done exactly what they were trying to do, where like you just create this sense of like, I just have to know what happens. So like you're gonna, it preps you for the next one.
But I enjoyed it enough anyway. Like it's a good movie. So like I was gonna watch I need to see how it finishes anyway. I just didn't
doubly good.
I just didn't need it to cut off like right at right before that point. Like,
Fair.
should have done it a little sooner maybe, and then we ease into it the next movie. But
Yeah, they're just like edging you for like a year and a half.
yeah, just like trying to wring as much money out of the franchise. I was sitting there. I'm like, I could have sat there for another hour, and just watched
Sure.
through all of it. I was enjoying it a lot,
Nice.
but yeah, nonetheless, that is my flavor of the week for this week. But Justin, what have you got for the people this week?
So my visual medium here. I'll start where you finish. My visual medium for the week. We've been watching the Fast and Furious movies. I think the last time we met, we had only watched like one or two of them, maybe even the third one. But now we are in the thick of it. We just finished Fast and Furious 7, or maybe it's just Furious 7. I think is
Fast
the title.
7.
No, it's Furious 7.
Is it?
Yeah, and then 8 is the Fate of the Furious.
It is Furious 7. Yep.
So yeah, we just finished that one. This is the one where sadly Paul Walker passes away during production. So the end of the the end of the movie is like kind of that, and them like saying goodbye in a very, I would say, very tasteful way. You get the Charlie Puth and Wiz Khalifa collab, "See You Again," beautiful song. So yeah, I think these movies just keep getting more and more ridiculous, but it's amazing how close to like they are not, they like plot wise, they're not straying far from each other. They are contrived, and just like they do a whole bunch of layering, but they logically follow, and like where it leaves off is right where the other ones pick, like where it leaves off is right where the other ones pick up. So there is a sense of like, man, these are really silly and dumb, but you can tell that there was care that went into at least the storyboarding in the long term or something. So yeah, it's kind of fun to watch just how ridiculous they are, and just how it levels up into like, all right, so now it's cars on the ground racing, all the way to like, yeah, we're just gonna jump them out of planes, land them on the ground. It's totally crazy. So it's fun stuff. And then my food here for the week, I've got to shout you out, sir. That breakfast casserole was amazing. I wish I would have been mindful enough to have more. It was such like a roller coaster of a day that like by the time we had gotten in the car, me and Sarah, we literally said to each other like, fuck, should we have eaten more? So yeah, would have loved to get my hands on more of that breakfast casserole.
I can send you the recipe. It's not too difficult, so I'm happy to send it over.
That sounds lovely.
Courtesy of my mom's family recipe and all. So
nice.
It's in a very old cookbook that my mom has that's been like added to from the family and whatnot. But she does that actually for Christmas breakfast every year. We have the breakfast casserole with some monkey bread, some fruit and whatnot. And so I didn't have the monkey bread, but the breakfast casserole is a good option.
Oh, it was a great option. We even had the little sliced up strawberries. No full strawberries. Did it what would you say, like bed and breakfast style? So that was awesome. Yeah. So thank you again for that. That was great. And then my music here for the week. We were listening to watching movies with the sound off on the way down, and then when we were doing some cooking recently, I put the vinyl on, listened to it there at the record player. So just a whole lot of Mac here this week, and yeah, that's a great album to go back to. It's really fun.
Yeah, I like that one a lot too. It's definitely a good one. I that'll be one I'll have to add to my vinyl collection. I feel like that would be a great one to listen to in that medium.
Unfortunately, there's only one skippable though, Euphoria. It's a terrible song.
It's so like slow and like I yeah, it's definitely skippable. I'd have to be in the right mood to like listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel you.
Rarely can I ever let that play all the way through, especially knowing that you have like the bonus tracks at the back.
It's tough with the vinyl though. You gotta just make it through, because what are you gonna do? Lift the needle and try and guess where the next song starts?
Well, yeah,
I guess
that's
you
a great point.
I guess you can kind of see, but
Nah, it's pretty tough. You have to, you're doing a little bit of this, little hunt and peck. But yeah, that's my flavor of the week here.
Nice. Well, as always, ladies and gents, that does bring us to the end of this week's episode. We, as always, really appreciate you taking the time to listen with us and to hear us jabber on about all the good, the bad, the ugly of F1, League of Legends, Magic the Gathering, and all that good stuff. So thank you for checking us out week after week. Find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube if you want to see our smiling faces, and hit us up on Twitter at tall and short of one if you want to get in the conversation. We'd love to chat with you about your thoughts for F1 or any of those topics.
But yeah, tell your friends. New episodes every Thursday. Aaron told you where to find us. We just want to say thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate your time. It means a lot to us that you take the time to listen. So just thank you. This has been another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast. Peace out, everyone.
See you.